Good evening. Hi, I'm Tom Jacobs, and welcome to the Bennington Select Board meeting. It's September 11th, 2017. We're convening at the Bennington Firehouse. Before we get too far into the agenda tonight, this is September 11th, ironically, and it's 16 years since we lost 3,000 plus innocents to acts of terrorism.
And to Benningtonians.
And it's an issue that seems like it's always there. It's our day of infamy, at least for our generation. If we just have a moment of silence in remembrance of that day. Thank you. I'd like to have the select board members introduce themselves, maybe from Chad down this way.
Good evening, Chad Gordon.
Hello, I'm Jeannie Jenkins.
Good evening, I'm Donald Campbell.
I'm Jim Carroll.
Carson Thurber.
And I'm Jean Connor.
Stuart Hurd, Town Manager, and Linda Bermudez, Clerk.
Very good. Thank you. Let's stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance together, and maybe Chad, could you lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Board. It's going to end up anyway. The consent agenda has been published, circulated, and otherwise. We have the minutes of August 28th and the warrants, which have been reviewed and signed by yours truly. I'd entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as circulated.
So moved.
Second, discussion relative to the items. Are there any grammatical, spelling, or otherwise that you... Wow, that's impressive.
That's because we beat them up last time.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I will... If there's no further discussion, all in favor of the consent agenda as circulated signify by aye.
Aye.
That's 7 in favor, no opposition. We now have a citizens' comment period. We have a number of folks that have signed up. I would caution folks that if there are items on the agenda tonight, we will not be discussing them. If there are matters that we've already talked about, heard about, please do not, and I don't want to say waste our time, but frankly, we're not disposed to hearing every week the same exact type of issues. If there are new matters that should come before the board for consideration, fine. But again, that's not the purpose of a citizen's comment period. So, Dr. Tenenis, you're first.
Very good evening. Alexander Tenentis.
You might want to speak into the mic, I'm not sure.
I'm a fluoride researcher and a local healthcare practitioner. I'm taking as much as I can from your comments, Mr. Chair. I'm trying my best to, within the allotted time of a citizen's comment time period, to address comments that were allowed to be made over more than a half an hour of the Select Board's time in the late July meeting, which left a lot of people on the other side of the camera and probably in this room who are watching and hearing the comments made not only by Select Board members, but the Bennington Oral Health Coalition members who came here to talk. And give some people the mistaken impression that perhaps some of the Select Board members were in agreement with the pro-fluoride message from those individuals. I came last time after having formally asked for response time of about half the length that was given to BOHC. I was told I'd have 10 minutes. I showed up last meeting and had to sign in for citizens' comments, which are 1/3 or less than the amount of time I thought I was going to have. So I'm hoping you'll allow me to just finish some of the comments I was going to make last time.
Could I offer you a response? Frankly, I can tell you that I am personally in favor of fluoridation. I think it's a very good oral health process. That's my personal opinion. I don't know what the board is. 1. 2, we had this already debated, voted on about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, and frankly, the board does not have the present intention of revisiting this as a personal or board
I didn't hear those comments from the illustrious chair
Okay,
when the
here, and let me
35
finish.
minutes were taken.
If
by
someone
the-
wants to bring a petition in due course, it'll come before the board, and many of us will personally participate in that process. But frankly, we're not going to give the opponents or the proponents opportunity to debate the issue again. We've been down that road, and if there's science one way or science the other, we're not going to revisit that. So if you'd like to continue with your comments, fine, but I don't have a lot of patience.
Thank you. Areopagus. Areopagus is a promontory in Athens, not too far from the Acropolis. The Areopagus comes from Ares, the ancient Greek god of war. The Roman version was Mars, where we get martial law, martial arts. The ancient Greeks knew that facing any type of situation or controversy that was important to their society was best addressed not through martial arts, martial law, but rather dialogia, through words. Those are Greek terms, dia, through, logo, logia, words. Through words, dialogue. The Greeks gave us a lot of things. They gave us the idea of kratos, demos, demokratia, people giving the authority to individuals in power, and how democracy, in this nation especially, where we pledged allegiance at the beginning of every one of these meetings to the flag for a nation that has liberty and justice for all in it, that we should be able to speak, if necessary, about things that affect our society and our citizenry. I know that for the most part, when we talk about things that affect our community, it's very hard for people to know about what affects our community if they're not allowed to find out about them. So, with respect to the chair's comments, speaking from the authority of the chair in which you were placed by the people, I have to respect what you're telling me I should do and what I should not do. But I find it distressing and disappointing that in this small diadem in southwest Vermont, part of the cradle of the birth pangs of this nation's liberty, that I would be censored and not allowed to speak about something that people had 35 minutes of the select board time to talk about without response. One side is propaganda. When you have disparate views, you have dialogia, or dialogue. I'm hoping at some point, via Sophia, through wisdom, at some point, the chair and the select board will allow me to address you with information that's pertinent to a board that also happens to serve as our water board. Good evening to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments or questions before I leave?
Yeah, I've got something to say.
Sure.
I've sat ex officio on the water board, or the fluoride
Or the Oral Commission.
Health Commission, and I think we've been pretty independent about not drawing any conclusions other than working towards what will make people's oral health in Bennington better. And no one on that board, in the time that I've been into just about every one of those meetings, has ever diminished anybody else's opinion on that. So that needs to be said. And I think you're implying that somehow your side hasn't been heard, and it has.
I hear what you're saying, and thank you for allowing me just quickly to reply, and I want to maintain brevity. I'm talking about myself, not my side. I'm talking about a disparate view from a pro-fluoride view. I want to make sure that when people talk about it, you have not heard what the other side has said. A lot of information has not come out yet. For example, the #1 state for fluoridation in the United States is Kentucky, with 99.9% of its residents on community water systems are fluoridated, yet they're ranked #2 in edentulous, which you know is toothlessness. You gave your anecdote about the gentleman coming up to get the chili dog, if you remember.
I just want to finish up with one thought.
That's fine.
Doctor,
I just want to, but I was responding to your comment, the last meeting of July, where you stated something about a man coming up to buy a chili dog with no teeth after a pro-fluoride thing, and you're talking about...
That's my opinion.
I understand, but I just gave you a stat that the #1 state in the union for water fluoridation is #2 for toothlessness.
Okay.
And the number
Well, I just
50th
want-
state is the 50th ranked fluoridated state with only 11.7% of its population fluoridated, and it has more teeth retention than the number 1 fluoridated and even the number 14 state, which ranks number 1.
I just want to finish up with one thought. The people of Bennington have rejected fluoridation twice, and I think that's a settled argument. I think it's democratically, the people of Bennington have chosen not to do it. And I don't think that, the only thing that we can work towards is finding some common ground to improve the oral health of the citizens of Bennington. And I think that's
Good.
what...
I agree wholeheartedly, and thank you for saying that, but I have to leave. But the thing is, I'm not trying to argue about water fluoridation. I came only to respond to specific comments because they left the impression that our epidemic was caused by anti-fluoridationists, when we know the data shows otherwise. I tried to give some of that data last time.
Okay, I think
Thank you
the
so much
comments
for
have been well made and will receive. I can tell you the proponents probably would have the same concern relative to the chair's statements as the opponents. Frankly, I don't have confidence that we will get any further with the debate, a debate that's already been had. The vote has been taken. There's always opportunity for the democratic process through petition to appeal to the voters again. But we've got a lot of business in this town to be dealt with, and frankly, I don't think we have the present intent to re-debate an issue that's already been
Again, I'm not interested in debate. I'm interested in defending the people who voted against it, who were told that they were the cause of the epidemic in this town, and wanted to give data that would show otherwise.
Okay,
And
thank you.
Thank you.
Next on our list is Joel Lenzner. Joel. The topic has hazard cleanup, hazmat, or hazmat, whatever. Your comments.
Joel Lenzner from Bennington. I think the town is abuzz with excitement about the potentiality of the Putnam project. In fact, major topic of discussion tonight later is going to be the TIF financing. And I'm excited about it as well, about what it might do to transform downtown. I had some concerns that I brought up at the DRB meeting last week, and I just wanted to share them in this forum as well, because there's a second meeting regarding the Putnam DRB meeting next week, if the select board should like to take a position on it. I have some concerns about the environmental cleanup. The corrective action plan that was submitted for the Putnam, in several places it only states that the project is located in an industrial commercial area. It doesn't make mention that it's also a mixed-use residential area. By not stating that, it doesn't bring to the attention of the EPA and the state authorities the true nature of the area and all of the residences that surround the project on three sides. So I'm concerned that the corrective action plan might have been more stringent if it had truly categorized the district as it is. But there's a second problem. On July 27th, the investigation and remediation of contaminated property rules was adopted. It was sent out and submitted earlier this spring. It mandates that the actions taken in the corrective action plan for the Putnam are no longer available as in a corrective action plan. And just let me read you from page 34. It's very brief. speaks to that environments including a stream, river, lake, pond, state or federally listed threatened or endangered species or habitat, wetland, floodplain, which is what we're talking about here, groundwater, residence, property boundary, or other similar areas within 100 feet of the treatment location. The treatment location I'm speaking of is a stockpile of PAH contaminated soil that they'll be leaving there under plastic tarps and coverings for 6 months. This is in a floodplain for 6 months of the year, and the report actually, if you read it, it states that this is actually a potential hazard. Let's see. Exposure may occur when the dust generated from impacted soils, erosion and transport of impacted soil via stormwater runoff has a potential to impact the Walloomsac River. Exposure may also occur via inhalation of dust generated from the disturbance-impacted soils or from soil vapor. I have a concern as a resident with 3 children who live right across the street from this, who are within 100 feet of the site. I think that there are more stringent measures that could be looked at to make this happen that wouldn't be so cost prohibitive. And I know hazmat cleanup is very expensive, but as we've seen with the ChemFab problem, when you don't take action and you don't follow the regulations, there are repercussions. And they may not be repercussions tomorrow, but they're things that we're going to feel down the line for those of us who are still here years from now. I'd love for the select board to take a look at this, because it is everyone's town.
I believe it's before the DRB right now.
It is.
It's also, if there are issues of remediation, the state and federal government must be involved to some extent. I would rather have it dealt with it in that context, and when it, and if it comes back to the board, we have enough information to glean an appropriate response or exchange, because I don't feel I'm at all armed with that today.
None of us are experts in this stuff. No.
Joel, a question for you. With respect to the soil that would be gathered, why does the law say that it can sit there for 6 months covered up, and why wouldn't it be hauled off sooner?
So in a true industrial commercial zone, before this new law passed, it was allowed to sit there. But that's given that it's in a zone that's not inhabited with lots of residents. Mm-hmm. The new law takes in, that passed 2 months after they submitted the application. They had to have been aware of the new rule, because it had already been submitted by then. Would say that you can't leave a pile like that for 6 months. You can't stockpile if it's in a floodplain any longer. You'd have to truck it off, which would be more expensive. But there are, again, I'm not an expert, but my understanding is there are less expensive remediation than trucking it off.
Let's defer to the
DRB.
please.
Mr. Chair, if I may. We did contact A&R regarding Joel's concerns, and we have a written letter that categorically denies any of those as being issues.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure that, I don't want folks out there to think that we haven't done this.
Right, exactly. Is that addressed to the DRB, or?
Just the DRB.
That's where it should lay, and that the public should
I'm
understand.
happy to share it. We just got it about 4:30 this afternoon. We're happy to share it with Joel.
I'd love to take a look at
They
it.
categorically said it complies with current and past.
Okay. Again, we're not into a discussion debate. This comments, citizens' comments.
But I would like, since this is raised...
You're going to have to after Mr. Lenzner is finished.
That's it. This is news to me, so I'd love to take a look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
He'll share that with you afterwards.
Great, thanks.
Bill, you could go. And you're out, basically, citizens' comment period.
Yep,
And I didn't
it'll
see
be
you
really
sign up.
brief. Bill Colvin, Bennington County Regional Commission. As Dan noted, there was some outreach following the DRB meeting to Vermont DEC to clarify a number of the issues that Mr. Culkin in his letter to the editor today and Mr. Lenzner in his testimony to the DRB last week raised. Since it came up at this meeting, I'd like the opportunity to submit the letter received from the DEC today into the official minutes for this evening's meeting.
I don't think we're going to be able to entertain that because it's basically comment period, not part of the deliberations of this. But I would suggest file it with the DRB, and it'll get to us in due course, I expect. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Jerry Albert.
Jerry Albert, Bennington, Vermont.
Good evening, Jerry.
How you doing? I got a one-pager, I promise. Only take a minute.
Okay.
The Bennington Oral Health Coalition has continued to make their pitch to fluoridate Bennington's water supply. During 2014 and 2015, both sides debated the issue. Water fluoridation was backed by the hospital, editorially supported by the Bennington Banner, and had the personal support of many on this board. After all the rhetoric and discussion, the issue finally went to the people on March the 3rd, 2015. The measure was soundly defeated by a nearly 30% margin. Now, a scant 2 years later, the BOHC is back again proposing the same issue. What would the BOHC have the Select Board do? Do they want the Select Board to sneak this chemical into our public water supplies against the people's will without nobody is looking and without any accountability? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Dr. Dundas. Doctor, you heard my earlier comments to Dr. Tenentis. Did you hear those?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I was wondering why I came here tonight, but now I know.
Okay.
I think it's wise of the Select Board not to hear a debate from this podium.
Thank you, because that's what we're not going to have.
And we certainly are not asking the Select Board to surreptitiously add fluoride to the water system in the middle of the night. I think that would, those barrels are heavy and you all might get back strain. But at some point in time, we believe there will be another debate about community water fluoridation. I just wanted to say that we stand by the facts that community water fluoridation is a benefit to the town, would reduce cavities for low-income people, particularly by 30% or so, which is huge. There is, although Dr. Tenentis would like to say that it is a toxin, it definitely is not so. It's been around since 1945, and it's.
I think we're getting into the debate.
A debate
that we don't want from that forum, and so all we're going to do is stir a fluoride pile without a resolution.
So I will finish just by saying that the experts in the field believe there is no toxicity to community water fluoridation. And I would like to give you a handout through your secretary.
I appreciate that this, just like the last offer from Mr. Colvin on another issue, this is citizens' comment. It's not for circulation because there's not an opportunity for discussion and debate. So at some future point, I expect we'll have the benefit of that, but not tonight.
Okay.
Thank you. And Board, if I'm speaking out of turn or without participation from the board, please write in my direction. But I believe that this is not a new debate, it's not a new discussion, and we're not really prepared as a board to take this on and have a recast vote or otherwise, unless the citizens do, through a petition route, decide to pursue it.
You're absolutely right. And let's be honest, citizens' comment we need to keep working on this, and you're doing a great job with it. But it needs to be brief, and it needs to be probably not debated from the board. So, as a board, we should continue to work on that. Hear comments and
we're not great at it, but we're trying to be open to the citizens, and I'm sure some citizens feel that we're not, but we'll do the best we can with the tools that we have. Okay, let's go into the next item on our agenda, which is basically, it's an important public hearing. We're a little past the start time of 6:20. Dan Monks is going to do some introductions, I believe, and we will get into that discussion.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. So we are here for the public hearing regarding the proposed TIF district plan. So what are we specifically asking for this evening? We are asking that the Select Board approve the proposed Bennington TIF district plan and authorize staff to prepare and submit an application for a TIF district to the state, the Vermont Economic Progress Council. So what does that mean? It means that the Select Board is being asked to approve a plan that will, subject to state approval, make the town eligible, not obligated, but eligible to access a financing tool, essentially a new revenue stream, if you will, to fund public infrastructure. It does not, as I mentioned, it does not obligate the town to use the tool or to build the planned public infrastructure. We are simply asking you to place this tool in our economic development toolbox. Whether or not we use this tool will be up to this board and future boards and ultimately the public, because we cannot spend any TIF fund money unless it's specifically authorized by the public. So I just want to put in perspective, this is just a plan. It gives us the authority, but not the requirement to use this particular, I believe, very powerful tool, because it's additional revenue that we wouldn't realize but for having this tool in our toolbox. So I'm going to let the experts talk about TIF and our TIF plan, and then if there's any questions or concerns, we'd be happy to answer those. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the folks here that are the experts here tonight to talk to you. I think we're going to start off with Gail Henderson-King with the presentation, and then Stephanie Henley is going to follow up. Stephanie is the preeminent expert in Vermont TIF. She's prepared correct me if I'm wrong, Stephanie, the Barrie plan, the St. Albans plan, and the South Burlington plan? Not the South Burlington, and Burlington plan. Okay, and she's also an excellent taskmaster, I know, and I hope that we're living up to her expectations, but we're trying real hard. So we'll start off with Gail. Thank you.
I think before Gail and Stephanie do start, I think you do yourself a personal disservice by saying you're not an expert, but frankly, over the last 2 to 3 or 4 or more months, you probably have gotten a certain amount of expertise which challenges those that say you're not an expert.
I've learned a lot.
Yes. Gail, would you like to introduce yourself and proceed?
Sure. Good evening. I'm Gail Henderson-King with Whitenberg, and Stephanie Henley is here with me tonight. So we are going to go through a quick presentation and then open up to questions and answers about the Bennington TIF plan. Okay. So why are we here and why TIF? So we're here to talk about the TIF and the process for moving this forward. You probably, we've met some of you, but this is probably the first time that you've seen all of both of us here, but we were authorized to work with the town to help create this TIF district plan. And we'll go through all the specifics on this. So municipalities throughout Vermont are always looking for ways to bolster their economic development efforts in their downtown. And be able to have as many tools as possible to make that happen. So TIF is one of those tools that's used, and this TIF district plan will hopefully be one that Bennington will be able to use. Just quickly talk about a success story. The city of St. Albans started working on plans and studies for how to revitalize their downtown, very similar to what Bennington has done. And they decided to focus their efforts after their initial planning effort on one block in their downtown and how to get that to redevelop. So they worked with the city, the state, local developers, and a local business in order to make this happen. And as part of that, using TIF as well as other economic development finance tools, they created public parking, streetscape improvements, utility improvements, and brownfield remediation. And that resulted in a new state office building, a new public parking garage, and a new hotel that just opened actually last month. So all of these efforts wouldn't have happened without TIF and all these other financing tools to be able to make this redevelopment occur and sparked a whole lot of additional development downtown. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Stephanie.
Good evening, everybody. It's kind of really nice to meet you in person. I feel like it's weird. We've been working for you for months, but now I'm getting a chance to meet you. That's a great example. We wanted to start with the why because really that's the reason we're here. This district we're about to get really technical, and it's a little bit boring and dry if you think about just the technical part of it. But what we're really here for is the vision, and that's where we're bringing you through in this presentation. But let me start with the dry and technical, which is how a TIF works. Essentially, it is a tool that the state authorizes, and it allows you to create a district within your town, a small subset of properties within your town, and those properties are identified, and they're identified because there are infrastructure issues around them and in that area that need fixing, and they're beyond the capacity of your normal general budget. And so they need to be fixed, and if you do those infrastructure investments, these other private developments can happen, that there are more projects that could be happening if you fixed the infrastructure. So you pick and you designate an area of your downtown, and then you invest in infrastructure. And you do that in concert with whatever public or private development is trying to happen, but is running up against these barriers. So the town then actually invests in the public infrastructure. It's almost always privately owned or publicly owned public infrastructure, so parking, brownfields, utilities, and by doing so, it's going to catalyze the private investment, the private dollars for a development project. So what the mechanics of it is that the town will bond for the infrastructure, and then when the private development happens, they will then be increasing the value of their property. Their property goes from being a $1 million property to a $4 million property. The new taxes on that now $3 million increment are going to go to paying down that debt that was taken out for the public infrastructure improvement. The reason we're here, and the reason it's a tool that's authorized by the state, is that you don't just retain your municipal portion to pay down the debt. You also retain a portion of the state increment. So your property taxes always a portion go to your town, a portion go to the state. Of the new taxes, up to 70% of what would go to the state on that new value is actually withheld within the community to pay down that debt until the debt is paid. And then after the debt is paid, it all goes back in the same proportions to the state and to the local government. So the point is, you get to retain something that would not, first of all, otherwise be there because you're catalyzing new development that would not otherwise occur. But for those properties, you get to retain some of what would go to the state. Now, the key there being that existing property taxes are not affected. So for the existing properties, both in and out of the TIF district, all of those taxes continue to go to the general fund and to the state education fund the way they do today. That's what we call OTV, original taxable value. That's capped as of when this plan is approved, conceivably tonight. After that, anything new, any new value, that's the increment. Those taxes are what's going to pay down your bond debt for those public infrastructure projects. So it's a bit of a, it's a bit of a self-fulfilling and self-actualizing plan. Oh, that's okay, Gail, you were on the right slide. This slide is somewhat helpful. I struggle with it sometimes, but it just shows that you've got that base at the bottom, and then anything new is now sent. Those education fund dollars are sent, actually, and 70% are sent back to, are kept here, and 30% are sent to the state. And the state likes this because not only is it incentivizing development and it's good economic development in your municipality, but the hope is that these projects wouldn't happen otherwise. So now they're getting 30% of that increment straight to the education fund, because these projects wouldn't be happening or would be happening in a less desirable manner. So. As nicely as I can put it. It's complicated and it's a little bit dry because you're talking about taxes. But what we've done in, go ahead, Gail, is in Bennington, we've been down here now a few months and been working closely with the town staff and with input from select board members, from the public, from property owners. We've put together an application and a plan that would allow you to apply to the state and get a TIF district in Bennington. The point is that you have to get approval by this Vermont Economic Progress Council, but they want to know that you've started by vetting this clearly within your town, so you have a general vision. So as Dan mentioned, this is a plan. It is meant to be nimble. It is meant to be adaptable depending on what comes forward. We have no crystal ball. I'm a consultant, so people constantly ask me to use a crystal ball that I just don't have. But in the next 5 to 10 years that you have this tool, who knows what might come forward. So a private developer may come to you with a project that we haven't identified here, but you can still use the tool. Some of the projects we've identified may not happen at all, and then you don't use that for the particular infrastructure that has been identified. But what we've done is developed a district. So we have identified a boundary. This is a subset of the downtown. It is all within the growth center, designated growth center. It is almost entirely in the designated downtown. Those are important clarifications because by state statute, it has to be within one of those designations. And now it's in both. And then what we've done is then identify what are the infrastructure needs. So there's a list of infrastructure projects in the TIF district plan that identify all the infrastructure needs that would help catalyze other private development. This ranges from streetscape to transportation, utilities, parking, parks, brownfields, stormwater, if I haven't said that. And hopefully, the hope is that this would be the menu that private developers would look at and say, well, yeah, if I had more parking, I could do this project. Or the brownfield cost that would make this project unfeasible and not profitable, if that went away to fix this piece of land, sure, I can make something happen. So here's a list of the private development projects, including renovations to existing buildings, some new construction, a mix of uses, residential, commercial, retail, that are just simply projections, really, of what could happen. And when we run those numbers, we project that one possible way this could come about is you could do $6.4 million of new public infrastructure that would catalyze $20.4 million of incremental new property value if all of these projects were done as we've predicted here. That's not likely in the 4 districts that I developed in other parts of the state. They're all in various stages of working out their plans because they're all still within their TIF debt window. Nothing has gone exactly according to plan. We just don't have that. But this gives you a vision to target, and then it gives you the tool, the authority to use it. And hopefully over the next 20 years, that incremental tax revenue pays down the debt service, and then it builds your grand list. And the grand list then goes to fund the education fund and your local general fund. The point of this being that none of this could happen without individual project scrutiny. None of this will happen without that. The state won't allow it. The tax department looks at everything very carefully. So every time the town wants to bond for individual public infrastructure projects, they have to go to the voters to get authority to actually do any of that indebtedness. And so that's why we're here tonight, is to give you the plan. This is the plan that is officially called the TIF District Plan, which is a very small subset of one of those binders that goes to the state, which is full of all other kinds of exhibits that give the state a good sense of what Bennington is all about. We've gone through this process. We've tried to make it, we've followed all the rules as we go, so you'll see that the resolution in front of you has a lot of statutory language that's required by the state. So we've gone through and taken all those steps to be very careful, and the hope is, once the plan is approved, that we apply to the state, and the idea was to apply by the end of the month so that we can be heard by the VEPC Council in October. And the hope is that if we got heard in October, they would come down. Their first meeting would be here in Bennington. They review everything that Bennington's about. They hold a couple more meetings, one or more meetings up in Montpelier after that. Two minutia issues, which was that after your packet was sent out last week, but I think you've gotten since then, there's a regional map that by the it was too small, so we created a second regional map and it's zoomed in. So you'll have a new copy of that.
Yeah, we got that.
You got it, good. So that just, because that has to go to the state, we needed to make sure that was in there. The other change that needs to happen is a very small clerical change that is going to go once you, if tonight you vote in favor of the resolution, we will make this one tweak, which is to remove one parcel from the list of existing parcels in the district, because it's actually not within the district. The boundary, when you do this, you use GIS a lot, and sometimes the boundary lines, so we had to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and when this does get approved, you have to get a certification by your tax assessor to say this is the original taxable value. And right now, there's one parcel that was listed on table 5H, if you're curious, and it needs to come off. But it's only it's about $138,000 property, so it doesn't affect.
Which one is it?
It's the 204 Union Street.
Jason to the library.
And
Jason to the library.
Okay.
And because that all is just about the existing baseline, it doesn't affect any of the numbers we're talking about, because that's all the new stuff. So that one clerical change will affect two of the exhibits in your TIF district plan, but the substance and the rest of everything else aren't going to change. And I think I'm done talking, but happy to answer questions.
Well, this is sort of like, how do you get in the game? It's not Monopoly because it's real money, but, before we even get to go, we have to decide whether or not we as a select board want to apply for the opportunity to participate in that game. The effort to date is just to collect enough data to create a reasonable district that encompasses those potential areas of redevelopment or development. We'd love to do it for the whole county, but this legislature in its wisdom has limited us to a certain defined area. So we're quite comfortable that the work that has gone before the discussion tonight is good. I would like to open it up for comments, questions from the board. Jean, would you like to start?
I have three. Do you want me to ask all three now?
You
or
go
one?
right ahead.
Okay. The first one is the public infrastructure list. It doesn't go into detail on what the actual projects are. It may be on one of the... Yeah, it is.
It is.
For the public, can you just name maybe a few of them?
Sure. Actually,
what page, Jean?
If there's no page numbers. It's public infrastructure projects.
So, the table that has, and I'm glad you raised that, because there's only so much we want to reiterate in the body of it, and then provide the tables, so there's already enough paper. But if I can draw your attention as an example to table 5, they changed all my letters, 5J, that's called Infrastructure Impact and Nexus. It has a lot of different project descriptions within it, and about explanation of proportionality, which is a test that has to be run by the state. So actually, Dan knows these projects inside and out as a shepherd of the...
You don't need to go through all of them. I just wanted to give the public a flavor of the kinds of things you're talking about.
So if you look at the TIF plan, probably the easiest way to look at these is on page, I believe it's 20, if I can get there. 20. Yeah, so the public infrastructure projects are are listed starting on page 20. And so let's talk about some of those. Many of them have to do with streetscape improvements in and around the four corners, including repairs to crosswalks, new wayfinding signs, accommodations for cyclists, et cetera. There's also, if you look at the Putnam block, we're talking about a very expensive brownfields remediation, a new parking lot, and a new public park. So that's one of the bigger projects.
That's enough.
Okay. We also have Franklin Lane, et cetera, et cetera.
That's fine. Thank you. I may have misunderstood you, but you were talking about the percentage, the 70-30. Is that negotiable, or is it a hard fixed number?
Great question. So the state will see this, won't they? So it is up to 70% that that the municipality can retain from the state. It can't go any higher. That's by legislation. They sometimes will ratchet that down once we get to VEPSI. If they think your numbers can run with less, they will try to do that. We're very close and we're using 100% in the municipality. You can use as little as 80 now, right? 85. The new legislation makes it so that you have to retain a minimum of 85% of the municipality portion. But we've opted for 100% because just to make the numbers work. So I don't foresee them actually ratcheting it down, but it is negotiable, actually.
Okay. And I have one more quick question. The feeling seems to be that the state is going to approve this. I mean, there's been no question about that at the state level.
We don't know. I wouldn't be that confident, only because, I mean, they have yet to turn one down, but...
It's the new
legislation. Yeah. This is a whole new ballgame, and they can go through and really change a lot, though. They can ask a lot of questions and push back on the boundary itself. They can ask a lot about proportionality and nexus. So is a parking garage that's within the district actually 100% fundable by TIF, or would they only allow up to 80%, something like that. Okay. So it's by no means a done deal.
So it goes from us to VEPSI to the legislature to the voters?
No legislature.
No legislature, okay.
VEPSI can approve it, then when there's a real project, that goes to the voters.
Okay. Thank you.
Those were three? Was that all three? Okay.
Feel free to come back with more.
This isn't a question, it's just a comment. This is available to all the public to read. Worth reading, every page of it. Very informative. But to Jeannie's question and comment, looking at some of the projects you listed on here, some are ones that I think you brought up daily of the streets of Bennington, like Ben High projects and things like that. This is worth reading. I mean, I guess it's more to the camera here. If you have the opportunity to take the time, every building that you kind of hear in general conversation and what's the future for it, you have a nice description. So I found great value in going through every page of this. So try to read it. Thank you for this.
I just want to emphasize the benefit to the town, and there's been some confusion with people that I've met, and I was able to turn around one of our more recalcitrant gadflies in Bennington to the benefit. We're going to make it easier and more attractive for developers to come to Bennington and decide to choose to develop in Bennington. And that has to be reiterated over and over and over again. My question, though, and I think this is for Bill Colvin, Mr. Colvin, is how are we getting the word out to potential developers?
Bill's going to have to go so the camera can see him.
I'm not sure I understand your question, Jim.
Well, there's this obvious benefit with the TIF district and attracting developers that would say, hey, you're going to do all this dirty work for us at no cost to me? Where are we going to find those people? And further, let me just backtrack a little bit. There's a misunderstanding among a part of the community that they think that this is going to be an increase in taxes for them. It's not. And that needs to be emphasized again and again and again. This is not an additional tax on people. we're benefiting, we're actually keeping our taxes and devoting it to developing the infrastructure in our town. So anyway, back to my question for you. How are we attracting developers?
Well, I think that's one of the challenges and one of the important reasons that this additional tool, is critical in trying to promote economic development in the community. I think by now, many of you on the board, many people in the public are familiar with the difficulties and the underlying real estate development economics that make it challenging to do this type of development in Vermont. So even with a TIF plan in place, I don't think there's a realistic expectation that developers are going to suddenly be banging down the door to do projects in Bennington. What we do continue to do is make known available sites like Ben High, like all of the industrial sites through the statewide industrial database, and through working with commercial real estate brokers across the region and across the state. We're now linked in locally with all of the available sites with the statewide network of sites, so that anybody who's inquiring in Montpelier through that point of entry through thinkvermont.com has the availability, the opportunity to see sites in Bennington, and we'll continue to do that. What this, if approved by the Select Board and by VEPSI, this would give us another tool when we have those initial conversations with prospective developers to say, here's another opportunity, here's another way to try to close the gap which we know exists to do economic development in rural communities.
But my central question for you, Bill, is there a place where you go to, where you say, where you market this sort of idea and say, developers, here's what we're willing to do for you? Is there a central place where you can go to, or some other marketing agency?
And again, there are a number of points of entry for economic development. So we are now completely looped in with the people at the Agency of Commerce and Community Development and the Department of Economic Development through the thinkvermont.com website. That hadn't been done previously in Bennington County. We're now linked in. All of the available sites in Bennington County are there. So often, people looking to relocate or developers will come look at the state first. At the local level, we have the sites available on the BCIC website, and we're coordinating through commercial real estate brokers. I mean, those are really the most logical points of entry. Despite what some people may believe, this isn't a dial, you don't call up developers and say, hey, come to Bennington. There has to be an underlying interest there. You make as many places as you can, the known sites available, and you provide information on the toolkits which are available. TIF would be a valuable addition to that toolkit.
I'd like to follow up on that, Jim. Just through this process, Mike McDonough and I have had multiple conversations with property owners, prospective developers. I think you're going to find that most of your development is going to be initiated by folks that either already own the property or are already talking to us about these properties. From the Putnam project, that's local people doing the work here, and I think that's what we're going to see, is that local people are going to be behind these projects, and we're in conversations with those folks, and this is another tool that we can use to help to get them there. It's going to take lots of other things too, like CDBG and new market tax credits, historic preservation tax credits where appropriate, but this will help us put together a package of incentives and financing tools that will make it much more likely that we can get across the finish line. It by no means is a panacea, but it definitely helps us get there, and there is interest of folks here in town. We've have property owners that have tried for years and years to get their property developed, and this gets us closer, and hopefully can get us over the finish line with some of those projects.
And I'd just like to say it's always preferred that we keep it local. I've been a great preacher on that.
And Dan, I think it's worth mentioning some of the names that you're commenting on, which would be some of our largest employers, whether it be the medical center, our colleges. Some of the largest economic drivers currently have come forward publicly with support and dollars to say that they want to be included. So I think it's worth mentioning.
I don't think they're done if this project happens. So.
Great.
Just had two follow-up clarifications because I had forgotten one of them that was really important. But first, to Councilor Thurber's point, this plan is really well developed, and I I can stand here and pretend that I have a lot to do with it, and I don't. Honestly, this was written by your town, the people you've invested in being the leaders of your town. And as a consultant, we come in and we've developed lots of these districts, and I don't know enough to actually write that, but I keep it shepherd. I'm a Sherpa, that's what we do. We Sherpa people through the process. But they just know so much, and that's what I'm really impressed with in Bennington. And again, we're not residents here. We don't have a vested interest in that, but we are vested in the state of Vermont and in economic development, and I've just been really impressed. So I echo that, but not about us. The second thing is the importance of the point you made, Councilor Carroll. I think the issue being the taxes increase, that misnomer, because truthfully, this has nothing to do with the tax rate. It does not increase taxes to anyone by having a district. What it does is the only ways that your taxes go up on a property, whether you're in or out of the district, is if you invest in the property and your value goes up, so your taxes go up, or if there's a town-wide reappraisal, or if your tax rates go up, but they go up for the whole town. So this doesn't affect that, and it's just about how you capture the taxes, where the taxes are held, either at the municipal level or at the state level. And one more point to the marketing part of it too, is that our experience has been within the development community, the municipalities that do have a TIF district are on the map. So I wouldn't say that, someone who's a local developer in Newport is going to come down and develop down here, but I would say that somebody who's looking to invest in a downtown, this elevates that interest and that attractiveness, because there's not that many in the state. So it's an added incentive, but it's one part of an attraction package for sure.
Thank you.
7 and 9. Let's do the 7 after these.
So, Stephanie, I have so much admiration for how much work you all put into this, and our town staff has put incredible work into this. And somebody was telling Tom and me this morning that of the successful TIF districts in Vermont, of the 9 successful TIF districts, 7 of them were in Chittenden County. So I think we can do a TIF district here in Bennington County.
We can make a pretty good argument.
I think this is going to be our moment, and I thank you for being a big part of that. One little question that I get confused on, and I think this is just the difference between what we might be able to raise and what we could raise. But so on page, and I should have asked you this plan earlier, I apologize, but on page 5 it talks about 5.4 million created through the district. On 9 it talks about 7.8 million, and your slide referred to 6.4 million. So I'm wondering which of those 3 numbers is the number that we, when speaking to people, should be really putting out.
That might be a good thing to fix in the document, but one of the issues, one of the reasons for the discrepancy is the cost of the infrastructure in today's dollars, and then you have to inflate them for when they might be done. So when you put them through the model, it's looking at a project being done in 5 years, it goes up by a certain amount, and so the number looks a little different. We should just go with the 6.4. That's the all-in number if everything happens in that particular year. So it's hard to, there's a couple of different numbers. It's like how there's a couple of different years. There's calendar year, fiscal year, and grand list year all involved here. So some of the numbers tend to move around. But Donald, thank you for bringing that up, and I think we'll just make that edit in the document so there's one number and qualify it.
One number would be great for us.
That'd be great.
We can probably
I'll help you with that.
One number
Thank
like
you for bringing that up.
6.4 million. But that's 6.4 million of taxes that we do not have to send up to Montpelier, and we can keep here to work on roads and to work on electrical and to work on internet and to work on parking and to work on removing polluted soil. So it seems to me like that's a lot of money not to have to send to Montpelier, and I'd be very excited about promoting 6.4 million.
I think it's 5.4.
It's going to be 6.4.
It's going to be, that's what I was just asking. Yeah. There were 3 numbers. Yeah. So, the other thing that's really, that comes out strongly, I think in this plan, but that we haven't talked about much as a board is and partly because we don't want to make false promises, but it's interesting to look at St. Albans and look at what that plan did for both employment and for filling vacant stores. And I know that they're not entirely comparable, but you've compared the two districts, and this same fellow that we were talking to mentioned that the TIF district in St. Albans created 288 new jobs, and that there were the vacancy rate in the stores
was 80%.
Went down 70%. Yeah. So there's 70% less vacancies in the stores. Now, those are St. Albans' numbers, but I think we here in Bennington should really be thinking about that kind of change if we want to see this community grow. So.
And just to point that out, because we do bring up St. Albans, because it's been a success and because it's been one of the districts that has done so well. And one of the keys there has been actually very similar to here, where the information was there and ready. There was a lot of potential. There was a lot of built-up planning that was done. All of the right boxes had been checked. Everybody had looked. So when we came in, it was easy. There's all the data is right there. It's been vetted, and it makes the case really well to the state. But it also is a sign. I mean, when we've come here now a couple times for public meetings, and there's been an amazing turnout. So it's about, and that's not happened in St. Albans, but there was engagement up there, actually, a civic engagement, not just by the residents, but by the leadership and by the administration, the town, and there was a lot of that forward momentum of everyone rowing in the same direction. That was key to making all of that successful. And I'm seeing a lot of that here too, just the last 3 months being able to execute this quickly, so.
Great, thank you, that's all for me.
Gene.
I just want to say I'm really excited. I thank you for all your work. I think this is really important for our community and for our downtown.
We're excited
so
for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No questions.
Just one quick question and comment, I guess. Of the projects that you've worked on throughout the state, and I think the 9 total TIF projects, and the reason I ask, we've heard people say, the town, could be on the hook for this if something were to fail. And I guess of the projects that you've worked on and of the 9, have any failed or caused a burden for any of the taxpayers in those communities?
It's a good question. And unfortunately, the answer is to be determined, because they're not done yet. Those districts have started they're not even done with their TIF indebtedness window. So we don't know, but so far, the projections are good. We also say that, what's been good to see is that there were communities like Colchester who actually decided to forego their TIF district. Their plans changed, things changed, so they closed their TIF without ever using it. So that's not a failure at all. That's actually a prudent use of the tool. They decided not to use it. And so I think, and some have used it really successfully, and others have been really, really small. So Hartford, as an example, has only done a few of their projects, and they've done really smaller projects, but that's catalyzed certain projects. But that's where the demand is, so they're not going to overspend. And I think the municipality, the voters are on the hook for the bond debt service. And that's why every time there's a new bond, they should look at what the revenue stream is, and that's what the revenue stream will be TIF this time, and as opposed to other times when it's been funded through a tax increase, for example. So I think not yet. We haven't seen anything fail so far. And I think it's 6 districts that are in Chittenden County.
6, all right.
Yeah. Barry, Hartford, and St. Albans are outside of Chittenden County.
Okay.
But all north of Route 4.
Yeah, there we go.
Just a couple of observations. One, I think I heard you say that if a project comes about, it could come about without TIF. But having TIF as a tool, the scale of that project might differ. It might offer to that investor an opportunity to expand the project and make it much more appealing to the community.
Sure, you can imagine that if a project could only park a certain number of vehicles, they're not going to build up, they're not going to build out, they're not going to make it a bigger project and more dense because they don't have the parking. Now if they have a public parking structure, across the street on the abutting property, they're able to really maximize that density at that location, and that's what you want in your downtown.
And the other thing is, we talk about the designated district, but we represent the entire community. And do you think it's safe to say that the benefit goes outside of the district in the context of all getting the benefit of that grand list?
In 2 ways.
Yes, go ahead.
Growing the grand list is going to benefit everybody. You've got more people, more taxes to float all boats. But also the public infrastructure, I guess maybe there's some people that never come down through your downtown, but I would be surprised by that. You have increased infrastructure usage in your most populated downtown. And in some ways, what it does too is prevents long-term, if you don't care for your streets and you don't make those improvements, the opposite is going to happen. Things are going to deteriorate, and that is a tax burden. So you're almost doing prevention as well as then this growth and increase.
And final observation, we've been blessed with a number of communications from various interested parties around the community indicating the favor of moving forward with this application. And it's kind of interesting, no two letters, at least the comments that I've gotten, email and otherwise, have been exactly the same, which is great because it shows there's a diversity of approach, but also that this is, if there is a common thread, it's like we're moving forward, we're all on board, let's make it happen. And this is just that real important tool to add to that toolbox. Go ahead, Jim.
Can I just ask, so emails that we've gotten concerning TIF, do those become part of the public comment record?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, because there are quite a few.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I think they've all made their way to the manager's office and Dan. And we'll be inviting individuals to participate when the council comes to the town to articulate that. And the folks have been really open and they will be very welcoming to the council to show what we have and what we're going to be doing. Any other questions or comments before we go into a more formal process? Anything from the community? This is a public observation or opportunity to speak if you'd like to. Please, John. I think that's right.
I'll say something.
Okay. Okay, you have to go over, yeah, thanks. I think it's public hearing, so it's got to be treated as such. Please.
Sheila Harden, Bennington Potters.
Hi, Sheila.
And I'm here with my brother businessmen, Jonah Spivak and Alan Carriel, Catamount Glass, and Hawkins House. We represent 150 years of business in Bennington. We're not in the district, and we're totally clear about how really essential this tool is for the town and for each of our individual businesses. So we really, really, really support this and are willing to talk to anybody about it. So there you go.
That's interesting because when we were just talking about boundaries and making sure it fell within the defined zones and areas, I thought, hey, North Street, Four Corners is all that activity. Maybe that's one of the reasons why it's not. It's because of that activity that's already gleaned in the process and the progress that is already undertaken. And I think that's part of what I commented on earlier. The benefits don't stop with the infrastructure stopping at a designated boundary line. It really extends out to the entire community.
And also just to the thing that you talked about, Jim, and the thing that Bill, you responded to, but basically it's many, many vectors.
Mm-hmm.
And I always love this. If we had some ham, we could have some ham and eggs if we had some eggs. And this really is that piece of everybody putting everything that they can together so that there then is the synergy that is economic development. And I think that Jonah and Alan and I are a wonderful example of basically fueling our endeavors on optimism. And there hasn't been any public money in what we're doing. And so I think that just the optimism and the positivity, and then I just also want to compliment our governance structure, because as far as I'm concerned and as far as we're concerned, you guys are marvelous, and our chamber and our downtown association and on and on and on. So thank you.
Thank you.
It's a good place to be, and it's a good place to do business.
I might have to get up and give her a hug.
I know.
Thank you, Sheila. And I've been fortunate enough to work with Sheila and Joan and Alan for the last couple of years, and I think we can all see the exciting stuff happening at Four Corners North. I did submit a letter of support to you guys to approve the plan and the application. I also submitted one to Dan to go along with the application to the VEPC board. I'm not going to read it tonight because it is public record. I did bring one letter of support for someone who is unable to be here this evening that I told them I would read it, so I will. But real quickly, the Bennington Economic Development Partners quite a few years ago, sitting down discussing the struggles we have here and what we could do about it, looked around the state and found St. Albans, and everything they were doing really jumped out. So 2 carloads of us drove up there and spent the day with them, asking them, how are you making all of this happen? Where's the money coming from? And we wanted to learn their secret. I guess the biggest thing we learned is they had nothing to lose. They were at 80% occupancy, very little money, and they put all their eggs in one basket and stuck their necks out and told us their plan, how they made this work. And one of the things they had mentioned was TIF. And we're a little familiar with it, but since then, the more we learn about TIF, the more we realize how powerful of a tool it is. I'm not here to sell you guys. The conversation tonight's been very informed and intelligent. I just want to say our support goes beyond asking you guys to support this plan. The hard part comes next. As Dan had mentioned, you're not approving the incurring some debt tonight, you're just approving the plan. It's going to be informing the public each step along the way when a project comes down. And the Bennington Downtown Alliance looks forward to continue to work with the town in educating the downtown community as well as the residents. So real quickly, this letter is from 2 members of the Bennington Downtown Alliance Board of Directors, one of whom also sits on the VEPC board. It's Michael Keene and Edie Sawitsky. But it says, dear members, we are writing you about the town of Bennington's tax increment financing proposed initiative and application. We hope that you will be unanimous in support of the Bennington TIF. As a member of the Vermont Economic Progress Council, the authority that receives and judges TIF applications, since 2012 and reappointed through 2021, Michael Keene has seen firsthand the TIF applications and economic development initiatives of St. Albans, Barre, South Burlington, and met with TIF representatives of several other Vermont municipalities that have TIF districts. Their initiatives have brought positive changes and invigorated their communities with new construction by developers, new jobs, and significant decreases in the number of vacant downtown properties. We both encourage you to support the TIF district in your select board discussions and also in conversations with your fellow citizens, your friends, and your local business contacts. Bennington is at a critical crossroad in terms of its identity and spirit, its growth prospects, and its economic potential. Your support of the TIF application will help Bennington to take the appropriate route forward from that crossroad. That's thank you, Michael Keene and Edith Sawitsky. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you, John. Thank you. That'll become part of the record. Eric, please.
I'm Eric Peterson of Old Castle Theater. Since 2012, when Old Castle moved downtown, within a few weeks, we will have invested in our building well over $1 million. And that investment will only pay off, and we will only continue to be here after 46 years, if downtown Bennington continues to grow. Then we can survive and we can grow. And TIF is a fantastic tool to help that happen, not just for Old Castle, but for every other business downtown. And so I urge you to do anything you can to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think the time is right to take some consideration of actions. There are 5 of them, Dan, if I'm not mistaken, and we can deal with them in order of their the way they've been released to us. First being to create the TIF district in accordance with 24 VSA 1892 subsection A. And
You memorized that, didn't you?
Yeah, he's got it right here.
Yeah, at least I use a teleprompter. So I think what I would like to do, that we should really vote on each and every one of these separately.
It's up to you folks. They are all included in the resolution.
Okay.
So you just wanted to list them all.
Okay, if that, the board's comfortable with that?
Yes.
I am.
These look like they're reflected in the resolution to me.
Yeah, they are. To adopt the finding that such action will serve the public purposes of 24 VSA subchapter 5, approve the TIF district plan under 24 VSA 1892 subsection B. Next is 4, authorize municipal staff to prepare and file the application with VEPSI. And number 5, pledge at least 85% of the municipal property tax increment to service the TIF district debt and pay related costs. To make the proposed projects feasible, the Bennington TIF district plan proposes to retain 100% of the municipal property tax increment. Is that fair and accurate? Okay. We do have that as a total resolution. Will somebody at least make that a motion to accept the resolution or make that resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Further discussion and/or questions relative to the resolution has been circulated for us to review and talk tonight. Do we feel that you're comfortable in moving on the?
Absolutely.
Jim? Okay. Okay, if there's no further questions or dialogue at this point, we would entertain the motion to entertain a vote on the motion for the resolution. All signify by aye.
Aye.
That's a unanimous vote of the Board of Selectors for the town of Bennington to proceed with their first part of this process. And thank you very much, Gail and Stephanie, for your presentation tonight. And our town management, as Donald said, have done a great job, but I think the heavy lifting is yet to come. But we're up to it.
You bet.
Great.
Can I make one comment?
Please.
I was remiss in, I don't see him here. Mike McGunness was really hoping to be here tonight. He got stuck in Midway Airport. He wanted everyone to know that he hoped that he could join us, but he's not here.
Mike was a big part of this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, is there anything else we have on that topic, or can we move on to further business?
We're circulating the resolution for your signatures
great.
as you're speaking.
And Dan, when do you expect the VEPSI folks will come down?
October 26th.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Here, they're going to have to show them a good time. So
We will do that.
We'll be showing them around the district. Hopefully we'll have a nice meal, and we'll have
Do you expect to
significant testimony as well.
You're talking about the meeting with the VEPSI at maybe like Oldcastle rather than this wonderful building?
I think we need to find a good venue for it, absolutely. And now that you guys have said yes, we'll start thinking about that.
Go chase Eric.
Yeah.
He has offered in the past, the timing just hasn't worked, so
Yeah.
hopefully it will work this time. And yes, we'll be calling on some of you folks to testify, some of the folks that already testified this evening, hopefully they'll testify. So it'll be a full day
Maybe
of
we can have
presentations.
a pre-meeting meeting and talk about how we can help and assist.
Yes. So,
Great.
Good.
thank you.
Okay. Sewer bond update, Stu.
Yes, thank you. At the last meeting, there were several questions that were raised during the discussion about what it is that the whole project would be and why are we not doing the whole project. And I prepared a memorandum for the board, and obviously it's available to the public. And I'll briefly just highlight the things that we're not planning to do and perhaps why. The first is the effluent filter building. This is a facility that uses a sand filter as a mechanism for a final cleaning of the wastewater stream as it moves through the facility. We are required to use it approximately 2 weeks out of the year during the summertime. It is a relatively expensive piece of equipment, the bridge filter itself, but it was felt that because of its minimal use, it was not essential to do it at this time, and it had been pushed back into the future. So we will have to deal with that at some point in the future, but currently it operates well and need not be replaced. The second is a septic receiving station. We take septage from septic haulers at the facility. This receiving station was constructed during the 1983 upgrade. Most of the deficiencies are related to mechanicals within the system itself, within the facility, and we believe they can be corrected using budgets on an annual basis as those pieces are identified. The influent pump station, also a critical part of the initial activity with the wastewater stream. These pumps are relatively expensive. They're very large currently, also 30 years old. They are Fairbanks pumps. You can still get replacement parts for them. They are in relatively good condition. They've been relatively well maintained according to our engineering analysis. And we would schedule a buildup of reserves to try to deal with those systems when the time comes. Then we move into primary and secondary clarification. Here again, these are concrete structures that the wastewater flows through and reacts with various weirs and systems within the concrete structures. The concrete structures generally have a 50-year lifespan, so they are not in any danger of needing to be replaced. And so we're talking about the equipment within those clarifying systems. Again, we think that we can handle those kinds of replacements on an annual basis through appropriate budgeting. The disinfection system. Here again, this is a mixing system that attempts to disinfect the wastewater before it is discharged. And here again, these are mostly internal operating systems, and according to our engineer anyway, can be replaced when needed through an annual appropriation. Sludge dewatering is another, it's a step that is used prior to the RBCs, I believe, after the RBCs, that takes the sludges that are generated through the RBCs activities, and it compresses the sludges to dewater them. It takes the water out. The water obviously flows back through the system in the facility. The sludges are then removed for disposal. At one time, we built a composting facility that would compost those sludges for reuse. Unfortunately, it did such a good job that the compost became very dry and created actually an airborne contamination issue that VOSHA wasn't very happy with. So we shut down the compost facility rather than put our employees at risk. And as you know, we've been talking with a couple of vendors over the last several years about leasing that facility out for use in composting, but not using wastewater composting processes. That too was just replaced in 2004, and its useful life is another 10 to 15 years, if well maintained, perhaps longer.
What's the value on that one, Stuart?
Pardon me?
What's the value on the sludge dewatering?
I didn't get a value from the engineers, and the explanation of why this was not a priority did not contain that value either. But as I said, in 2004, when we rebuilt the compost facility after a fire, that entire facility was rebuilt at the same time because they are directly adjacent to one another, and it suffered damages according because of the fire. So that has been done, and that was obviously paid for with insurance funds at the time. So we're talking about conveyor belts, polymer feed systems, those kinds of things that are relatively easy to replace in-house with the appropriate materials. So when you look at all of those and you add them into the project as proposed, We were looking at about a $12.7 million project at that time. Adding in the engineering costs and fees, it would have come up to around 17 million as estimated in 2012. Because we have now prioritized it, because the town has committed to doing some of the work with its own staff, we're now looking at a project that is 9.85 million. That is the priority pieces that will, as I say in a letter to the editor that should be published soon, will maintain the vitality of the Williamsack River and also allow us to continue to operate and perhaps grow and prosper while we can handle these other things on an annual basis or on an as-needed basis. We don't project that we would be back looking for an additional bond within the next 5 to 6 years after this bond, assuming that this bond is approved.
Staying with that one just before we leave it, as I understand, that bond will not even be applied for or placed until the project is completed, and then there's a period before you have to start repayment on that?
By using the state's revolving funds, the bond payment does not start until 2 years after substantial completion. So when this project is finished, which is projected to be sometime in 2019, we hope to have the RBCs online in 2018, but the remainder of the project will take somewhat longer. Assuming some sort of mid-2019 completion date, these bond costs will not actually impact our budget until 2021, FY 2021. Yeah. So we have time not only to perhaps build additional reserves and be prepared for that eventuality. And remember, if this bond is approved, our sewer rates will go up approximately $160 on an annual basis, which if you do the math comes out to 44 cents a day. We are told by the engineers at the last meeting, and they reiterate that in their 2012 report, that our rates are approximately $150 a year less than the average wastewater treatment plant rate in Vermont.
Could you emphasize that on October 2nd?
Yeah. October 2nd, we'll be talking about that again, and October 10th, we'll be looking for a positive outcome.
Stuart, you know that I was at the last meeting a little bit worried that we were cheaping out. I was worried a little bit that we were not, there are two kinds of cheap, right? There's the good kind of cheap, where you're being very frugal and saving money, and there's the bad kind of cheap, where you're cutting corners too much and leading to problems. And I think I found this document to be extremely reassuring. And it feels to me like it would be ridiculous to replace pumps that have a good long service life left in them. And so I appreciate the fact that you went through that larger number and you picked out the things that really could wait and really could be maintained, so that we can be the good kind of cheap, or we could be the good kind of frugal, or whatever you want to say, and focus on the things that really need to be done. I was worried that the 9.85 was so much less than other communities are putting into their systems, and I was afraid that we were selling ourselves short, but it looks like instead of selling ourselves short, we're selling ourselves smart here by doing what really needs to be done and then making preparations for the future. So the only request I would have is that when it comes to budget time, we take a look at some of these big costs like the 440 and the 450 and the 960, and we try to calendar them a little bit, and we begin, just as you do with your capital plan, to build those in on an annual basis, so that the next select board we'll all be long gone, but the next select board won't end up having to do full vote on things.
And I think that's our intent. I did this memorandum using the 2012 report, and I sent it on to the engineer to make sure that I wasn't misspeaking about the things that I was saying here, and he vetted it very well, and I think our goal will be to begin the very next year budgeting for the capital facilities replacements of these items, so that we we can begin to set aside funds for that, but also we can chart where they should be and where we should be looking seriously.
And we can start this with this budgeting season. Yeah, great. Okay. Thank you very much for the extra work on that. I really appreciate it, and it feels like a great plan.
I mean, if you go back and you look at some of the discussions previous boards have had about this particular project when it was first introduced at a $17 million price tag, there were very serious comments made by board members about, can we afford that? Is that the amount of money we should be looking at, or is there something we can do that's a little less but gets our priorities adjusted?
Well, and if you have a $960,000 pump that's heavy iron and is going to last another 10 years with minor maintenance, there's no point in replacing it now just because we're doing the bond now. So it's extra work to break it out, but I think it's smart.
And you're bringing up the very clear point. If we start to budget for it now, it's acceptable. If we wait 10 years and then say,
oh well,
on time,
unacceptable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think we're doing the best we can.
And we're not kicking it, the can
Not
down
at
the
all.
road.
No. We're carrying it.
I don't believe so.
Thank you, Stuart.
You may not be able to answer this. Will the repairs and the replacements that we're going to be doing extend the life of some of this other equipment that, is going to need to be replaced at some point, but, I don't know anything about water treatment equipment, but do you think that's a possibility?
Yes, I do. Generally, especially with things like pumps, weirs, chains, those kinds of things that are they flow through, or they move through the flow. Those things we can replace in-house. Our staff are competent enough to do that. It's a matter of buying the material. And I can tell you that, I mean, this plant has operated for the last 31 years at a very, very high level until 2015, when the RBCs began to really become problematic. And even still today, I think the engineer would tell you that some of our systems, because they've been so well maintained, have extended their lives beyond the normal 20 to 25 years. So yes.
Good.
Anything else you need from us?
No,
I appreciate that.
You'd raised the question last time, and I thought it would be appropriate.
It's helpful for us and the community if that gets circulated, and probably repeat it again on the second.
And you briefly commented on your letter to the editor. I would strongly encourage people, once that's published, to read it. I mean, it's easy for you to go through these numbers now, but I read what you wrote, and it helps. So.
Yeah, I hope that the public understands that the processes that we have identified in the $9.85 million are essential to the quality of the river. And if in fact we're going to shortchange ourselves now, then we will be shortchanging the quality of the river, and I think that's the key. We can afford to do this. Yes, it's going to put some strain on folks, but it's what I would consider to be a potentially bearable strain at 44 cents a day. It is something we need to do. It is something the river needs us to do.
The state requires us to do.
Yes. We're going to get fined.
Well, there's that too.
Yes, and is it not the case that if we don't do this, then we will be paying for it not only by having poor water quality in the river, but we will be paying fines so that, we can either be paying to upgrade the system, or we can be paying fines and then still need to upgrade the system.
I try not to look at it that way, but you're absolutely right.
Sort of like.
Okay. Anything else? Questions more? I guess we'll go right into your report.
Manager's report. Just a little conversation about the PFOA work in Area 2. I don't think it's been made a big deal yet, but the 4 contracts that will affect the Bennington residents have all been bid and awarded. All of them came in at or under the estimate. 2 contracts were won by a contractor that's worked on our system before, Schultz Construction. Another was Belden Construction. They've also worked on our system before. And then a relatively new entry into the southern Vermont area, Gallo Construction. It's a firm that St. Gobain has worked with in the past and is believes very competent when it comes to water system improvements and extension. So we've got 4 contracts, 3 excellent contractors, and I can tell you they are now chomping at the bit to get going, and we're waiting for the public comment period and the state to issue its final ruling on the agreement that it has generated with St. Gobain. That's in Area 1. Area 2, which is the one that contains the former landfill on Houghton Lane that is not being dealt with through this particular agreement. We today approved the locations of the drilling and testing areas at the landfill site. We met last week with the engineers from Bar Engineering, which is St. Gobain's firm. The state of Vermont and EPA were also there. We walked the site, we talked about locations that they thought were important. We actually reduced the number of deep drills, and there was obviously a lot of concern on the part of EPA, the state, and the town that we don't want to penetrate or impact the landfill that was capped and is functioning very well. We don't want to impact that. Today, I received a letter from the state of Vermont approving the locations that Bar has proposed, and actually took a ride up to the site and went around to the various locations where we talked last week, and have issued that formal approval as well for the town. That work will most likely begin, I would say, in early October.
What does that work look like? Is it drilling and then filling?
They're doing soil tests, which are relatively not impactful. It's a matter of driving a stake or a pipe into the ground that grabs the soil, and then they take it out and test it. There are some deep drills where they're going to try to get down into the bedrock, or down at least into the secondary aquifer. There is a shallow aquifer that lays beneath the landfill site. It traverses the landfill from the west to the east, runs from a very, very shallow aquifer after bedrock to a relatively deeper aquifer on the easterly end of the site. Below that aquifer is a very, very dense clay layer. So dense, in fact, that when they were trying to drive some of the soil testing mechanisms through it in 1995, 96, when we were testing at the Superfund, for the Superfund site, they couldn't penetrate it. But that's one of the things, is the belief is that there is some sort of a secondary aquifer below that clay layer that may be impacted by PFOA, where it wouldn't have been impacted by the other contaminants that we've studied thoroughly at the site. And we capped the site with those in mind. So that's what Bar is looking for, is that kind of, well, the word tonight is nexus.
I just have one thing to say. Nobody is ever going to accuse you of not knowing the details.
Well, I took office when the Superfund was at its peak.
And so a shallow aquifer and a deeper aquifer.
Well, thank you.
Could have made it all up.
Yeah.
Yes. So there's some truth to that, but nonetheless.
All right.
And just to finish it all up, I know that at least Abby Shapiro is out there probably listening. We are attempting to work with our current software provider to generate some sort of an Excel spreadsheet that will kick those numbers out on a monthly basis and give us some readings that we won't have to pore over a lot. And I'm hoping that we'll be successful.
Any way we can give her a break?
Hold on, before we get to that, I just want to stay with where's that in the process? Maybe Linda's probably getting that software fix or...
Well, the software that we use is a New England Municipal Resource Center software. It's used statewide for utility billings. It operates, it takes the readings, and Linda can correct me because she knows this better than I do. It takes the readings and transmits it to the bill. So if you're going to read at another time where you're not generating bills, you've got to figure out a way to grab that information and send it to another spreadsheet that gives you an Excel, I think is what we're trying to work with.
Otherwise it overwrites the last bill monthly immediately, or it just wipes out your last bill.
So you have to find some kind of a default to
an Excel. And then that Excel spreadsheet, if you can manipulate it properly, will point out those anomalies for you.
Speaking to Jim's question, I think you've had a discussion with Abby relative to the bill,
Yes.
and she's comfortable with it.
Yes, and I'll speak for her because she made it very clear to me, she's not looking for a break on her water bill. She understands that the toilet was leaking and the water was used. Her goal is to ensure that it doesn't happen to someone else or to her again in the future. And by catching it on a monthly basis, we can help people.
And she said she can speak for herself. That's what she said.
And you put a line here that is important to note, that these meters, you can track your own use.
You can.
You know, if you have some concern, make a spreadsheet, put it next to your meter, and walk down there weekly or bi-weekly, and just keep an eye on it. All of a sudden, between one of your own readings, if there's a large spike, you might be able to save yourself some money. So that's kind of a dual purpose that you guys are working on it, and we as landlords or homeowners can
help yourself. How many meters do we have operational now, approximately?
The reading software, we went to the remote reading in 2001.
And we have 1,134 meters.
1,130, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Is that all you have, Stuart?
That's all I've got.
Okay. Other business tonight. Could I start with Jean?
I just wanted to point out, I read an article in the Hill Country Observer, I don't know if anyone's read it, about the difference of the two states, New York and Vermont, handling the PFOA crisis.
No.
We should be very proud of our state, and everyone should read that article. It's quite startling what a difference there was, and we came out on top. So kudos to our brave little state.
That's right.
This actually, it might bring Dan back to the microphone, I'm not sure, but in the checks from last month, I noticed a couple that were related to the Ninja bike path. Do you have any updates in respect to that? I mean,
that's a good question.
I think a lot of us in this community utilize the Bennington area trail system on Mount Anthony and in around the hospital, and then in respect to the Ninja bike path, which connects a little bit more of our Northside Drive, Bennington College community. So if you want to just speak.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. And I did plan to come with our transportation planner and our consultant on all the path projects soon to you folks, but I'd be happy to chat about the Ninja.
I just noticed one small line item, one larger line item, so.
Sure.
Fun thing to talk about.
Here's the status of, we're going through the process of accessing the funding that we got through the federal and state governments. We have just submitted the first set of design plans, which are called conceptual plans. And it sounds like you're not too far along, but actually what we did is we front loaded the process. We've spoken to all the property owners along.
Dan, what is the Ninja bike path? It's just.
Okay, sorry.
I know the answer to that, but can you just say it again?
So it is a pathway that will connect Bennington College / North Bennington to downtown by way of a basically riverside pathway behind Hannaford, behind Morris Industrial Park, and there's an existing portion already behind Walmart, and then it would continue on across the footbridge by the golf course and into town through those neighborhoods. So the portion that we're working on right now is a section from the existing Walmart path to the portion that the town built last year that connects the Hannaford Plaza to Bennington College. So that portion is the portion we're focused on, and that's the portion we have funding on, although we do have other portions of the project that we hope to complete. So the status of that project, we submitted conceptual plans to the state. We've dealt with we believe all of the permitting issues, at least preliminarily. We don't think there's any showstoppers. That took the longest time because the river program folks are very squeamish about us being near the river, but we figured that out, and we think we figured out the wetlands issues. And I'd like to say, and it makes me feel just really good about this community, is every single property owner, except for one who's still a little squeamish, but every single other property owner is enthusiastically embraced the idea. So that, usually that's your biggest problem with these pathway projects, because folks have concerns or they're worried, but everybody, one who's a little squeamish, we'll get them there, enthusiastically supports it. So that's usually your biggest hurdle, and so I feel like that one's, we're handling that well. So that's the status. Once the V-Trans looks at those plans, then we'll go to preliminary plans and then final plans. That's probably a 1.5-year process. But the good news is we have, it's essentially open to hikers now. We're not really ready to do a formal announcement yet, but you can walk the entire thing because we do have 2 bridges in to cross the Furnace Brook and a drainage way behind Hannaford. So you can walk all the way from the Bennington College pathway to the Walmart along the path, except for one portion where you walk along Morse Road instead of where the path will eventually be. And we hope within the next 2 to 3 weeks to finish up those bridges with some ramps so folks can take their mountain bikes up and over them. And we hope we'll make that announcement and have signs so people can follow it more easily. But if you want to do a little exploration, you can get out there now and easily get through there. We've noticed already that some mountain bikers have discovered it, even without us putting that word out there, that it's a good place to go. So, and we're really proud of the bridges that we were able to put together for not a lot of money, combination of donations and a contractor that worked really well with us. So we're very excited about it, and not quite ready to make the announcement that it's open in its interim configuration, but we're darn close. So,
thanks, Dan.
Nothing else for you.
Very brief update from the world of Act 46. We've been working really hard on getting a good plan out there to bring the local schools together and hopefully improve the system. And we had talked at one point about having a vote on October 10th, which we are putting off thanks to some really great advice and help from Bennington's incredibly competent town clerk, Cassie Barbeau, who really sat us down and talked us through the realities of pulling a vote together. And so right now we're looking at a November 7th special vote to try to work on the getting that passed. It'll probably be the only thing on the item, but there will be, assuming we move forward, there will be the opportunity for us to vote a slate of directors also. So the new district will also need new directors.
At the same time?
At the same time. And that's state statute. It has to happen at the same time. We can't do them separately. So a little bit of reprieve on timing, but an important vote probably coming up on November 7th. And there'll be a lot more coming out about that as time goes by.
Nothing.
I don't know if we can do something similar to what the BSD did at their last meeting about public comments, but is there a board policy or regs that we could circulate amongst the board or look into?
Create.
Or something. I think it's helpful. It seemed to work with the BSD last week. It definitely needs some work.
What did they do?
They publicly addressed the policy. I think they were having some concerns with a lot of give and take between the board and public, and just readdress what their policy was and what it should be for the benefit of the board and for the community.
I think that's a great idea. So let me, take the
I think I'm speaking to that properly right now.
Yeah. Good.
We can
I know a couple of members.
BSD director.
Yeah, we kind of know one of them.
Yeah. How come you've been letting us do this without the benefit of it?
And if there isn't a policy, I don't know if we can look at theirs and adopt a policy that would be
We
similar.
don't. You can tell. And so I think that's a really great suggestion. It would make a lot of folks' lives interesting and help the community. So there's an understanding of what the comment period is and is not. And the chair's not done a very good job of saying what it is not. I don't think I have anything that needs to be...
We have a brief executive session.
Yep. All right. We need to move into an executive session for a contract matter, the purpose of which will be discussed in executive session, but if the terms, conditions of the contract were released, it would be inappropriate to the board and to the individuals involved. So I'll need a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. We'll go into executive session as soon as we all are able.